Exnilo's web hosting technical expertise, service, and 20 years of experience help to enable over 500,000 website owners grow their businesses. Go to exnilo.co.za today to open your business to the world. Exnilo, trusted in hosting. I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is TechCentral. I'm joined now by Lezanne Human, one of the co-founders of the new digital bank that enjoys the backing of former FNB CEO Michael Jordaan, and that is, of course, Bank Zero. Lezanne, welcome to you. As I mentioned, we're using a new platform today to do these interviews, so touch wood, it's going to go all right. But thanks for agreeing to be a bit of a guinea pig for us today as we test out a new video streaming platform. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Duncan.
Now, Lezanne, you're an executive director at Bank Zero, and as I mentioned, one of the co-founders. What were you doing before this venture? Have you always been in the financial services sector?
Sure. Just before I joined Bank Zero, very much in financial services at one of the big banks and in different roles across the bank. And prior to that, sure, I've been everywhere. I've been in consulting. I worked in the textile factory on the Cape Flats. I've been in the first Stopcom wave, and I think lots of lessons learned from that as to what one thinks one should be doing and what the market is ready for. So yeah, I've been in lots of places, but lately in financial services.
So what was this .com venture you were involved in?
Actually, semi-financial services as well. We were building a vault for one of the big banks where you could basically provide all your balance sheet and income statement information. And based on that, we would then offer you the best product to buy from an investment perspective and also a life insurance perspective. I guess what we didn't keep in mind is that this specific company had a large broker force. And you don't touch a broker force by trying to disintermediate them and hope that you're still going to have a business. So it was a good business idea, but also a very bad business idea that got executed well, but just had no market.
I think it pretty much sums up the .com era in one sentence, actually. But how did you come into the financial services space? Is Bank Zero your first venture in this space, or have you previously worked at any of our banks?
So I actually joined eBucks and ran eBucks for a few years. So it was sort of on the periphery, semi-financial services. And then worked with our partners within FNB and RMB and gradually started joining the bank itself. So yeah, financial services. Oh, and also in consulting. I started off actually doing consulting more in public sector and in manufacturing, and then ended up very much within financial services and consulted to a lot of the big banks. And then somehow just slipped into it. I think my whole career has been one of landing up in an industry that was interesting to me at the time. I didn't plan it beforehand.
Okay. Now Bank Zero, everyone, of course, knows Michael Jordaan. He was a bit of a rock star CEO at FNB, and he's got his own investment company now and investing in companies all over the place, particularly in the tech sector, but also now in financial services. He's an investor in Bank Zero. How did this whole venture come about? How did the team come together? Whose idea was it? And how did it get started?
I think we were all ready for a change, and many of us actually left the corporate world and the big banking setup on our own and then got together afterwards. But very much Michael and Yatin. They're quite a power team. It's under Michael and Yatin that FNB got the award for the most innovative bank in the world. And that was the time when FNB became such a digital force to be reckoned with. And it was Michael and Yatin that got together over many bottles of Bartini wines and started coming up with the concept of the bank, of this digital bank.
Yatin Nasai, he's the CEO of Bank Zero. What is his background?
He originally comes from a tech background and then slowly morphed into very much into banking. He was heading up the retail bank when Michael was heading up FNB in total. Yeah, so the two of them worked closely together. Yeah.
Okay.
But So Yatin has a strong technology angle along with his banking angle. And I think that is one of the key things, is that one has to be very careful when you start any digital initiative, that you have a strong knowledge of technology and a strong knowledge of the industry. I think that's a very powerful combination to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you get involved, and who phoned you up and said, come and join us?
So I got involved in March 2017. I think March 2017. So that's just over 3.5 years ago. Um, that was the time just as the application to become a mutual bank was sent into the Reserve Bank for approval, and a long process that followed after that. So I was lucky that I could be part of it right from the start.
Yeah. So who was it? Yatin who gave you a call?
Tin and I just kept contact over the years. So yeah, all of us, I guess, kept contact in one way or another.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were aware of these discussions and what was happening, and did you have any reluctance about joining this venture, or did you say, well, no, we have to do this, guys, let's just go?
Oh, Duncan, I mean, imagine here you have some of the best brains in the industry with so much vision that they have, and you have an opportunity to join it. I don't think you have to think about that too much. It's such a wonderful opportunity.
Sure.
And especially because the idea behind Bank Zero, if you look at what we're trying to achieve, our slogan is "Be the Change," and that's not meant in a corny way. We really want to see how things can change for the better for customers in the industry. So this is very much purpose-driven. This isn't only about let's start a business, let's make some wonderful money and exit. This is absolutely about a long-term play to make a difference for so many people out there. That's our aim.
Now, you mentioned that Bank Zero is registered as a mutual bank. What is a mutual bank exactly, and why did you choose that particular model?
So it's interesting. A mutual bank from a customer perspective won't look very different in experience to a commercial bank. It's more in what happens behind the scene. So with a commercial bank, you typically list on the JSE and your shares are tradable, normal equity. With a mutual bank, you do not list. You have very specific shares that can be transferred, but it's definitely not sold on the JSE. But it also allows for customers to become shareholders. And our whole functionality of Bank Zero, which we have not revealed much about yet, is that it's built on an ecosystem. And that ecosystem works very well with the mutual bank construct around how do you connect customers to each other. So that's why we went for a mutual bank. Also, with a commercial bank, you need a much higher capital requirement, and that's typically required because you have complex product structures and you have to do lots of reporting, and that type of overheads is very expensive. We have a very simple product range. It's a check account, and then you have cash investments accounts in the form of savings and notice accounts, and then you don't want complex overheads. And then a mutual bank structure with a much lower capital base is perfect.
Yeah. Do you intend, I presume you intend to grow that product portfolio though post-launch? Do you see yourself eventually becoming a full-service bank and offering everything that one of the big five offers?
Not us directly. We want to stay very simple. The moment you start adding credit as your own product, the costs and the complexities, as you would know, is immense. So we will be offering those products in future, but it will be more in the form of a marketplace. So we'll be partnering with other service providers to offer that. So yes, in time, many, many years of gradual expansion, we will be offering most products, but not us directly, through partners.
Right, understood. Okay. So, Lezanne, take me through what is involved in launching a new bank in South Africa in 2020, from both a regulatory perspective and a technology perspective. What does it take?
A lot of hard work and patience. And first step is just to apply for the license. We often complain as individuals and as small businesses, big businesses, about red tape and regulations, but In the case of where we applied for the license with the Prudential Authority, I could see why one has to go through so many hoops. Because in the end, you actually link into, in our case, we are a full settlement bank. So we link straight into the national payment system of South Africa, of the Reserve Bank, which means we can settle directly with the Reserve Bank. And for that, they need to be very sure that you have a strong business model, a sustainable business model, one that will have enough income to continue, that you have very strong risk processes in place, that you have, in the case of a mutual bank, more than in a commercial bank, it's quite a conservative model where you cannot just invest your funds anywhere. It's quite controlled, what you can and how you can do it. And that's a long process. So it took us 9 months from when we applied for our banking license until we got provisional approval. It's called authorization to establish, and then another 9 months to actually get our license. And that process in between involved a lot of back and fro queries and questions where we had to provide answers to lots of in-depth questions. So I think we can safely say that by the time a bank is allowed to be a bank in South Africa, it's gone through some rigorous testing. And I think that's part of why our banking system is so stable compared to other countries. We don't see the amount of bank failures that you typically see in other countries. So that's the regulatory part. Then now you have a license. What do you do now? I think one of the big questions that needs to be asked by a bank or any business for that matter is, so how will your IT systems work? And especially in the case of Bank Zero, where we're all about technology and digital. And then you have to decide, so do you buy or do you build? And it's quite a bold decision that we took to build our core banking platform instead of to buy something off the shelf. Most banks would buy off the shelf. And the reason we wanted to build is because you can build everything in from the ground up. So your regulatory issues, how you do FICA, how you do all your different screenings, pervasive encryption, a lot of the innovations that we've built in, the patents that we have, or patent that we have, all of that is built into our system so that it doesn't have to be bolted on afterwards and is cumbersome. Yeah, so I think those are the two main parts, I would say, in terms of building the bank. It was the regulations and getting approval, and then how do you build your systems?
Yes.
Or get your systems, yeah.
I remember Michael Jordaan a couple of years ago already now tweeting quite excitedly when Bank Zero's mainframe arrived. I think he posted a bunch of pictures at the time about this mainframe, the size of a fridge, being the future bank. The world is moving increasingly to hyperscale cloud data environments like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, etc. And I know that some fintech players in South Africa are developing and building financial services products directly in the cloud rather than deploying their own infrastructure. What advantages do you think having your own mainframe as opposed to using one of these hyperscale providers provides Bank Zero ahead of its launch?
Yeah, and look, we are such a bunch of nerds, so we were so excited about our mainframe arriving, and then we got quite a few claps from people on Twitter saying, "Why are you on a mainframe when you can be in the cloud?" It was a debate that we had, so it wasn't just a decision that we stormed into. We're following a hybrid model, so some of our stuff is in the cloud. The non-core banking stuff that we have is in the cloud. Okay. We still feel that from a security perspective, a scaling perspective, and also a cost perspective, that it's easier for our core banking platform not to be in the cloud. It's typically when you buy cloud capacity, it comes in steps, and those steps can go up quite quickly and can become quite costly. And especially if you want to move out of the cloud, it can become quite costly as well. So on a very, how can I put it, non-technical level, that's how I would explain it. If you want to go more technical than that, I'll have to drag my CIO in to come and chat to you about it. But for us, it was from a risk perspective and a cost perspective and how we could play with our scalability. That was for us the best decision.
Okay, perfect. Now, Lezanne, we've seen a large number of digital banks being announced or launched in the last year or two in South Africa. We're also seeing mobile operators increasingly edging into this space. Is this market suddenly becoming too competitive? Is it going to be big enough to support all of these new players in your view?
Yeah. So I think there are a few things. Given where technology is going, given how incredibly powerful a smartphone is, how cheap technology has become, I'm actually surprised that there are not a lot more digital banks that are coming in at the moment. And I think part of it is because of the very strict, rigorous processes to go through in terms of becoming a bank. Is the market big enough? I think it's a case of there are so many people that are not banking at the moment, and that doesn't mean that we're going for the unbanked or the underbanked specifically. We're going across the board. Um, for us, it's a case of there's space for us in the market. And for us, what I mean there is where basic banking is free and where there's really cool technology in terms of how you can really have full transparency and control over your money at all times. So we know there's a space for us. Is there space for all the banks? Time will tell.
Yeah, yeah. So, what is Bank Zero going to do differently to the other digital newcomers that are coming into this space? Why should I, as a banking consumer in South Africa, I currently bank with one of the big five banks. Why should I consider Bank Zero as? Why should I consider switching? What are the reasons you'd advance for considering Bank Zero as an option?
So I think there are two parts to it. The one is pricing, and we released the pricing last week, and I'm hoping that people are liking it. The feedback we've been getting so far from most people is that that it is really impressive, and what we try to do there is to say that basic banking should be free.
Right.
We want to turn this whole pricing model on its head of saying that you pay X amount a month and then you get free stuff in there. And some of the free stuff you don't even need. So in our case, we wanted to say you do not pay for basic banking. Then if you do want other stuff, then you pay for it.
Right.
So pricing is a big component, which is why we call Bank Zero. But then there is our functionality. And that's the part where I can't share that much with you yet. Our beta customers are seeing it. It's a mix of how we manage the ecosystem of customers. There are things in there around security, about how visible the movement of money is to you, how we display certain things to you. That I think is a really good part. So I do all my banking through Bank Zero, but I still have my account at another bank as well. And I'm quite frustrated every time when I'm on the other app and it can't do the things that I wanted to do as an app. So, but I'm so sorry, I can't tell you more about the functionality yet, but that's the really core part of what we offer, I think, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned the pricing, and I know you published the pricing details on your website, I think it was last week now. Just at a very high level, just take us through what your thinking is around that pricing and what some of the pricing looks like.
Cool. So monthly fees, zero. So you never pay any monthly fees for any of the accounts, whether it's a check account, savings, notice, no matter how many check accounts you have, you continue paying zero. Then typically what happens in many of the current incumbent banks, you would pay a monthly fee and then you get zero EFTs and debit orders.
Yeah.
In our case, you also don't pay for any EFT payments or any debit orders, which is first in South Africa that has happened. You also don't pay for any card swipes, but that often happens in banks. You don't pay for transfers. So there are a whole list of things that you absolutely pay zero for. Even if you want to do a proof of payment and you're willing to go the email route rather than the SMS route, you won't pay for that. So we try to zero as much as possible. What we said is the only time we'll ask you to pay for something is when we incur a third-party cost on your behalf. For example, your card is personalized and couriered to you. That's a direct external supplier that we pay. And if you are willing to pay that, it helps us keep the basic banking fees free. If we send an SMS proof of payment, we pay for that. that. So we pass costs on to you. And then there's certain value adds that we have. But we're hoping that the cost there would still be seen as low. An example is our QR codes. So our QR codes are in a closed system. You must have a Bank Zero payer and receiver to be able to do a QR payment. But the payer doesn't pay anything. The receiver pays 0.5% of the total amount, which, as you would know, typically in the industry is much lower than the 2 to 5% of the current QR solution providers. So I would say that's sort of a summary. We are typically compared with the new banks out there and the incumbent banks on the individual pricing. But where we're really hoping to make the impact is on business pricing. Because if you look at how small businesses, what they pay is typically 120 Rand a month for monthly fees, and then they would pay 17 to 19 Rand per debit order, and they would pay per EFT payment. And they are hurting terribly. And we specifically want to get our small businesses, want them to kickstart, because that kickstarts the economy, and that's what we really need at the moment, is our economy needs a kickstart, and the small businesses can help.
So are you going to be specifically targeting entrepreneurs as part of your client base? And are you going to be targeting a particular LSM?
So we are specifically targeting businesses and specifically targeting anybody who doesn't want to pay high banking fees and are afraid with using an app. We are, in other words, specifically targeting anybody that's interested in our type of offering. Will we be for everybody? No. If somebody wants a very sexy loyalty program, then we're not the right bank for them. And I know from my old eBucks days that you typically would find 50% of people that love loyalty programs and 50% that couldn't care less. Same with if somebody really wants the personal private banker to do their work for them, then we're not necessarily the right bank for you. But some don't even know who their personal banker is and want to do everything themselves, then we would be right. So it's basically anybody, as I said, who likes working on an app, who doesn't want to pay a lot, and I think businesses will definitely benefit from that. So no specific target market that I can give you.
No, sure. We increasingly don't need bank cards either. I know I do a lot of payments now with Samsung Pay on my mobile phone rather than taking my card out of my wallet. It's actually starting to reach the point, I think, for digital savvy banking users where they don't actually need physical plastic in their wallets. Are you going to be launching a plastic card, or are you going entirely digital?
Definitely launching a plastic card for the simple reason that it is still required in South Africa. Okay. If we were launching Bank Zero in China, no need to have launched a plastic. Do we see that as the main part of our offering? No, our app is, and if you look at our pricing, it's all about digital work. But a card is still needed. So what we said is, if we are going to get a card, then let's make it as secure a card as we possibly can, and that's where we do have a patent. It's quite it's a very funky patent, and we are trying to get card fraud down in terms of that. Card fraud is sitting over R1 billion at the moment in a year, and that's definitely something we don't want to see happening on our Bank Zero cards.
So, what can you take us through some of the security you built into that card?
So we basically have three different PANs. PAN being the account number that's on your card, that's printed there. So the one that is printed or embossed on your card is not the same card number that is used for swipe transactions or for chip transactions. So typically what happens is you sit in a restaurant and somebody skims your card. They use the mag stripe card when they skim your card. Right. So if they then use that card and try to use the number for an online transaction, then we will decline that transaction. So it's quite straightforward. Actually, how it works, very nifty.
Yeah.
And hoping to get security better in that way.
Sounds interesting. So anyone who's interested in signing up for Bank Zero, when are you launching commercially?
So we, at the moment, doing very much beta testing, and I almost want to call it a throttled launch. So we're allowing more and more people in. as we allow them in, we're discovering things in the industry where, for example, Bank Zero is not loaded as a beneficiary bank on certain companies' systems. And then we need to go to the company and say, hey, why haven't you loaded Bank Zero? Or certain payment gateways that are giving us problems, which is not stuff related to necessarily what we coded, but what's happening out there. So that's what we first wanted to fix, to make sure that all of those issues can be sorted out. So we're allowing people in slowly. At this stage, what we're doing is, if you want to join, send us your details to our info email address, and then we'll add you to our beta database. And then slowly, as we move through it, we'll allow people on. So it's still waiting list at this point.
So what is that email address in full?
info@bank0.co.za. Quite straightforward.
Great stuff. Now, I think the traditional banks and quite possibly FNB in particular are going to be watching Michael Jordaan's first efforts since leaving the bank in the financial services space. Do you expect some of these, the bigger incumbent banks, to try to frustrate your efforts as you head towards launch?
I'm not sure I can talk to the frustrating our efforts part, but in terms of competing with us and taking us on, for sure. And I think that's part of the fun of being in the industry, is how we launch different products, do it in different ways, talk to customers in different ways, create new functionality. I think that is what the customer is the ultimate beneficiary. So I'm hoping that there will be new ideas and new things launched by the current incumbents, because that keeps us on our toes as well. I wouldn't expect the banks to sit back at all. So in the customer benefits, and that's all we want. That's why we say, be the change. We are the change, hopefully, that will create what is needed for customers. That's all we want.
Great. Well, Lezanne Human is co-founder and executive director at Bank Zero. I much appreciate you taking the time to talk to TechCentral, and look forward to the launch of Bank Zero in due course.
Thank you, Duncan.